Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to Build, Live, Give podcast, episode number 5. And today we've got a fantastic guest. We've got Larry Connett from Brilliant Forge. And Larry's been at the heart of Silicon Valley. He's worked for some of the biggest brands in the world, IBM, Apple, eBay, Yahoo. And he just didn't have junior roles. He had really senior roles. And he draws on that experience to give you some great views into the Valley. And I really enjoyed this conversation. He's also been on the corporate side, as I said, but he's also launched his own startups, and he's also helped a lot of startups in the Valley. So he gives some excellent tips on how to pitch to investors, also how he's got some great ideas on funding and what you should do, when you should seek funding, etc. He's also got some really good productivity tips that he drops. And also he's passionate about his cause, and he talks about that and how he goes about that on a day-to-day basis. And he also gives you some really good practical advice on platforms and podcasts. So Larry is, a guy with great experience. He's a great storyteller, and I know you're going to really look forward to this podcast. And just on what's happening with the Build, Live, Give community, it continues to grow. We're getting a lot of 5-star ratings. We'd love to have more, so please leave a 5-star rating so that we can continue to build this community. And if you want to find more about the community, go to buildlivegive.com and you can see how you can join up to our free Facebook group. So grab your pens and paper. Larry does a fantastic job in this interview. So now I'm going to hand over for Larry to share his story. Welcome, Larry Connett, owner of Brilliant Forge, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. We're going to go into more about you as the podcast goes through, but what I'd love you to do is just start with a bit of a summary of, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My background's a little convoluted, a little different. I actually got my start in psychology, so I have a PhD in human factor psychology. And I studied basically how to design software for people, how to make it usable and useful and so forth. And that really kind of drew me out to Silicon Valley. I ended up going out to IBM for about a year to work on database and application development software. So I got my start as a designer and researcher at IBM, and then went back to work on my dissertation, got another internship at Apple Computer, which was really wonderful because I've always been a huge Apple fan. And then decided to take a full-time position with Apple. So for a period of 6 months, I was working on my dissertation every night, and then working with Apple during the day. And so that was a kind of an intense time in my life, but it was a wonderful place to work. I was there during the transition when Steve Jobs came back, and working on Mac OS X, which was a huge change and a huge shift for the company. So that was pretty exciting. Left Apple, went to a startup and did a bunch of work with a startup, and then that got acquired, spun back out, had another startup, and then finally said, I want some stability in my life. And I started my first business in Silicon Valley. So it was more of a design agency, and ended up working with a bunch of startups during the boom, which is really exciting. Then the dot-com crash happened, and basically the Valley was in pretty big trouble. A lot of the startups I worked with, essentially folded up and closed their doors. And so I was trying to decide whether I wanted to stay, running my own design agency, even though it was becoming more challenging, or go back into a corporate job. And so I ended up going back to a corporate job at eBay. So I worked at eBay for about 4 years, and that was exciting too. Really got to do a lot of international travel and work with our teams all over the world. But then an opportunity came up to join Yahoo Search, which is a really technological position, but I loved working on search and learning everything about it. And I ended up being promoted to be the vice president of consumer products for Yahoo Search. So I was there for about 4 years until I think we decided to outsource the back end of the technology to Microsoft. And so it was going to be Bing And we worked through that transition, but then it was no longer going to be really interesting to work on search at Yahoo anymore, to be honest. So I left and I started advising startups. Again, started my own business, which is Brilliant Forge, and started out working with a lot of technology startups and basically working with them on product and design strategy, revenue models, and helping them get funding and so forth. And then I got the itch myself and I started my own technology startup, which was VoiceKick, which is a mobile startup. And so we had a couple of products that we developed. One was a micro podcasting app, and the other one was more of a video marketing tool. It made it really easy for people to create short marketing videos on their phones. But then I formally decided after 3 years of doing that to close the doors on that, which was hard. I mean, we all loved the company and the product, but it really was time to kind of move on. And now I'm focused 100% on actually being a career advisor, which is kind of interesting. It kind of happened over the last 10 years where I basically spent a lot of time working with people that I had known from my early days, Apple and eBay and Yahoo, and helping them move forward in their career. And so meeting with people over lunch and over dinner and coffee to kind of guide them through their career and helping them get promoted, helping them find a new job. And it finally struck me. It was kind of one of those, it was too close for me to even notice, but it was a bit of a revelation that this is actually kind of my calling and it's really what I should be doing. And so I've formalized that, and now I focus, like I said, 100% on being a career advisor for people who are really trying to get to the next level in their career.
Fantastic. And look, we'll go further into your expansive career and some great brands that you've mentioned there and some wonderful experiences. But tell me a little bit about yourself outside of work. So something that friends or family would know, but the BLG listeners wouldn't know about you.
Yeah. So I guess, when it started in my last year of corporate life where I was really realizing that almost 8 long years of really intense corporate work and working really long hours had taken a toll on my health. And so, it's one of those things that kind of creeps up on you. I'm not super young. So the weight gain comes on and you eat pizza in meetings and donuts in the breakfast meetings. And before you know it, you're out of shape and overweight, not feeling so great. And so I decided to take that really seriously and totally changed how I exercise and how I eat. And started that, I guess it's been almost 8 years ago. And I lost like 40 pounds and got into the best shape of my life. And I love it. So that's a big part of my private life is I take my fitness and my health very seriously now, which I think has been really important for being able to be around later for my kids and my grandkids. So that was a big change that I made.
Great. And look, as I said, you've had lots of brilliant corporate experiences, but can you sort of go back to that exact moment when you thought, you know what, I think I'd rather work for myself than continue to be working in corporate?
Right. So I'd had that happen the first time during kind of the dot-com boom period when I left Apple to join a startup, and then that all, the acquisition and spinning us back out and the shutdown, all that kind of was my first step into entrepreneurship. And it was a little scary. That was really the first time I'd done that. And I had a family to support, but I found that I like it. I like running my own business and managing my time and finding clients and so forth. And so that was kind of my first taste, which reassured me that it is possible to build a business and be successful that way. But I'd say the second time really was kind of an opportunistic thing where, like I said, Yahoo had outsourced the search back-end technology, and a lot of us that had worked on search for many years, some people decades, were really trying to decide, okay, what's next? It doesn't make a lot of sense to stay at a company that's no longer investing in search technology. And so it started out more of, okay, I think I'll just do some advisory work, and then, I'll look for a job and see what I can find. But the longer it went, the longer I was enjoying it. And I said, you know what, maybe I won't go back to a corporate job. And I like working with startups. I like working on my own business. It's a really good energy working with folks like that. I enjoy setting my own schedule and having the flexibility and spending more time with my family. Of course, that was really important. So I think that was a bit of a turning point. And almost 7 years ago, and just decided, you know what, maybe I won't go back. I'll just keep running my own businesses.
Great. And you've over that 7 years, and like you said, you launched your own business. Then you decided to close that down. You would have got lots of great help through all of that roller coaster Talk about some of that help. Who helped you the most, and what sort of helped you through that roller coaster of running, your own businesses?
I'd say a couple of things. One is I've had a bit of a trusted inner circle over the last 20 years, and these are people that I've worked with, at IBM and eBay and so forth, and Apple, and we've stayed in touch. We've stayed in touch over the years. It's what you'll find with Silicon Valley, if you spend any time here, is it's a very small valley that everybody knows everybody. So it's very easy to stay in touch with people and to build a deep relationship that can go on for decades. And so I think that was one of the biggest parts of my network and my success, is having people that I could trust to bounce ideas off. And so as I was thinking through a number of startup ideas, and I probably went through a dozen different ideas before I started VoiceKick, I had people I could meet for lunch or over coffee and bounce the business model off them and what I was thinking, and get honest feedback from people that had been down that path themselves and raised funding for their own startups. And so that was a big part of me feeling comfortable about what I was going to do, is having people that I could turn to and get good advice from.
Great. And you said that was one. What was the other one?
Yeah, the other, yeah. So I've been very lucky that the people that I've worked with at places like Apple and eBay and Yahoo have gone on to, in some cases, fund or found multiple startups and have some acquisitions, and some of them have gone IPO. So they've been rather successful, and a few of them have turned into angel investors and advisors and joined VC firms. So there were some folks that I had known and worked with that now are angel investors, and they work with startups all the time. And being able to call someone up like that and get a lunch meeting and basically talk with them about how to prepare for a funding round. What are people looking for in a pitch deck? Does my idea have legs? And so I would say that was really the other part that really helped me in terms of being successful with it, was having some pretty high caliber talent that I luckily had access to, that could give me some really honest feedback, and I knew that they were successful with their investments. So what they said really helped, really mattered.
Great. And look, we've got a few people in the BLG community that are looking for funding at the moment, and they're going through pitch processes. And the Traxen Club, which I run incremental to the group, we've got quite a few people seeking funding in the US at the moment. Given your experience and rich knowledge, what a couple of key things or couple of key pieces of advice you would give on actually talking to investors and getting that pitch right?
There's feedback that I think Guy Kawasaki has given, that your slides should be no more than 10 slides, and it's right. I mean, you really do not have time to go through 20, 30, 100 slides. No one's going to have the patience for that. So you really have to figure out what is going to be the most impactful and front load that in your deck, in your presentation, because I think that most of the investors have probably made up their mind about whether they're going to invest in you or not in the first 10 minutes, maybe first 5 minutes, right? Yeah. So they're trying to assess your credibility, your charisma, your background, and then if your idea is intriguing, it matches their portfolio. So that's important too. That's basically the homework you should be doing ahead of time, is that you are talking to investors who tend to invest in whatever your business is. So you'll see people try to pitch an investor, and what they're investing or what they're proposing is something completely outside of their standard portfolio. And that's kind of a waste of time for everybody involved, because it's really not their expertise. The investors tend to want to stay within a domain that they know very well, so they can provide good advice, and they have a good sense of how to evaluate a company or a startup and look at that pitch. So that's important. Do your homework. Look at what's in their portfolio. Make sure there's no huge conflict of interest. If they're investing in somebody in your portfolio that's a direct competitor, they're most likely not going to invest in you. So that's something you have to consider as well. And knowing the background of the partners that you're going to be speaking with, or the angel investors, like, where did they come from? Are they a business person, a design person, a product person, marketing? What did they care about, and what are they probably going to push on? What has their track record been? And, how have they been involved? Look at their media presence. What did they say when they're interviewed? What do they care about? So that you're speaking the language that they understand. And I think that has to come through in your first 5 minutes, or you're probably not going to be successful.
Yeah, look, that's fantastic advice. And I suppose a lot of our listeners hear a lot about the Valley and that in that part of the world but haven't experienced it themselves. So to hear someone that's got firsthand experience is fantastic. And if we sort of fast forward a little to today, if you walk into an event or you meet someone, how do you describe what you do today?
The way I describe it is I'm a career advisor, and I work with frustrated people who really aren't getting what they want out of their corporate career. So they've hit a ceiling, or they feel like they hit a wall and they're stuck, and they're a little bit frustrated, but they don't know how to get past it because they're a little too close to themselves and a little too close to the job to have that objective perception of it. And so I basically help people create a career transformation plan. And the whole idea is to get them on a path that is more aligned with their long-term vision for themselves, what they want their legacy to be, what their goals are, so that they can be more successful, they can be happier, and at the end of the day, just feel more fulfilled with what they're doing.
And are you seeing any trends, Larry, is this becoming more prevalent, especially in the US? I know here in Australia, there's a lot of people in corporate. I left 5 years ago. There's a lot of people now looking to go and do their own thing. And this is sort of one of the reasons why I started BLG. But how's that look like? Or what does that look like in the US at the moment?
Absolutely. I think what you're finding is that a lot of folks that grew up when we did in the 80s and 90s that were basically told, go to college, get a great job, make a ton of money, move up the corporate ladder, and you'll be happy. That's what success is. And I think a lot of people followed that formula. And so they did that. And then they found that at the end of that ladder wasn't the happiness they expected or the sense of fulfillment they expected. So I think a lot of people are, I'll call it a coming of age, but they're getting into their 40s, 50s in that career that they've been in for a couple of decades and basically saying, is this all there is? Is this what success is? Is this what happiness is? And I'm seeing a bit of this awakening happening across a number of the people that I've known over the past 20 years. So I think it's not uncommon. I think a lot of people get to a certain point in their corporate career and don't feel like it's fulfilling anymore. And so it's become easier to become an entrepreneur. I think the new technology platforms with advertising on Google and with Facebook as a platform to reach almost everyone in the entire world, and things like Twitter and LinkedIn, all of this technology has made it that much easier, I think, to build a company, build it online, and have channels where you can reach people. And so I think it is giving people the confidence to say, what if I decided to start my own business and create the organization that I've always dreamed of and surround myself with the people that I enjoy working with and work on something that gives me meaning, because now it's possible.
Look, I totally agree. And I remember when I was back in corporate buying businesses, you'd often have a massive technology advantage. And, the first thing you do is go in and implement your software into their business and see the profit gains from that. Whereas now I was talking to my wife who works for a very large company, and the frustrations she has, I just don't have running my own business from home. And this conversation we're having here is on a platform that costs me, I don't know, pick a number, but I think it's about $70 a year to run this whole platform. It's just what's available for the entrepreneur today, as you said, is amazing. And for you to track that, I suppose, if you look back to your Apple days and even your early IBM days, did you ever think it would be as good as it is now? How far ahead were they predicting, and how close is it to that prediction?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in some ways it's advanced much farther in terms of the cost of compute and cloud computing and how easy it is to spin something up and a lot of off-the-shelf components to essentially have a website up and running in an afternoon, right? Yeah. Set up with mail and advertising and all kinds of stuff. And then I think on the other side, where we had a lot more expectations, I think, for video conferencing and virtual reality and artificial intelligence that we thought was just around the corner when I was at IBM, and this is in 1993. And it's only now that I think we're starting to actually see artificial intelligence and virtual reality coming to fruition. We're seeing it coming into mainstream products. So I guess it's yes and no. It's pretty easy to spin up a business and get online now, but I think some of the technology that we expected would be right here, where we could have a virtual reality conference around the table, it's not quite there yet, but I think it will be in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and look, I think artificial intelligence and bots one of my business partners is looking at that for small business at the moment. I think there's some brilliant opportunities coming our way, and that'll sort of be the next wave, which will be very exciting. So if I sort of look at your current business model, how do you sort of make revenue in your current business model?
Yeah, I have, I guess, three primary revenue streams. One would be the one-to-one consulting and mentoring. And so people basically hire me on retainer, and on a monthly basis, we meet a couple times a month through video conference. In some cases, for my higher end tier, I go and I fly to people to meet with them in person, because I think it's still hard to replace that face-to-face interaction. It's really powerful. And then I create a private one-on-one team as well. I use Slack, which has a technology that I love. I've been using it. I used it for my startup for many years. And so we set up a private team so we can talk at any time, day or night, just message each other and keep that communication in a channel so it doesn't get lost, because it does. An email, it gets totally buried. So that's one of my revenue streams. The second is a much more affordable kind of group mentoring through a mastermind. So it's a career mastermind team. Again, that's using Slack, but instead of one-to-one, it's one-to-many, or many-to-many, if you want to think of it that way. And so we basically use Slack as a means of communication to talk about pretty much anything, any career questions someone might have, support they might need, bouncing ideas off us to get feedback. And I have like homework exercises that people work through to get clear on what they want or what to do for their personal brand and so forth. And then the third that I'm introducing, because it's kind of exciting for me, is to have live workshops. But I'm looking at doing a bit of a world tour, but setting up 2-day workshops in major metropolitan areas around the world, looking at the Bay Area, New York City, London, Sydney, and so forth, where I sit down for a very intensive kind of 2 days with probably a group no larger than 20 to 25 people, but work through a process that typically might take 3 to 6 months through my mentoring, and try to condense that into a 2-day workshop and work through it face-to-face and just in a very intimate, live, physical way, where I think we can get a lot done in 2 days. And so that's my third revenue stream.
Great. And my only build on that, Larry, is don't forget Melbourne.
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah. And, so it sounds like it's sort of evolved from doing one-on-one into more scalable.
Yes.
Which is great. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced as you've gone through that model change or those pivots?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is, I'd say, like you said, the one-on-one only scales so far. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's only one of me. So that's an obvious thing where I needed to reach more people, and obviously at a better price point as well, because not everybody can afford one-on-one mentoring. Probably the biggest challenge I faced that I discovered very early was that the typical kind of Facebook group, I guess, with real identities, was not something that people wanted when they're having career discussions. And that I hadn't fully anticipated, because I'm kind of an open book now, but it made sense later, where when someone's struggling with their career or job and they're going to say, I don't like my job anymore, I hate my boss, they don't want to say that in a kind of a semi-public place. Even though it's a private group, there's still real identity associated with that. So, here's their photo with their real name saying, I hate my boss. And that's terrifying, right? So I encountered a lot of that, where I was like, oh, people do not want to open up in a group like this and admit that they're having a problem with their boss. And so that was why I made the transition to the confidential and anonymous private mastermind, because I know people want to have a place where they can talk openly and get feedback and advice, but not fear retribution from their company or their boss. So that was an interesting challenge I had to overcome.
Yeah, and look, if I look at the two communities I run, we've got the Build, Live, Give community, which is a closed but on Facebook. And then I've actually got a separate platform. So we use something called Podio, but it's similar to Slack in a way. And we make sure that, that is effectively locked down for the very reasons that you spoke of. And I think that's really important for anyone listening, any of the BLG listeners thinking about that community play. I think, yes, Facebook's fantastic, but I've been in others with Facebook, and I think having a separate platform is great advice. And speaking of advice, what's some of the best advice that you've received as you've grown this fantastic business?
I'd say the best advice is to test demand before you build the product. It's kind of lean startup advice too. It applies to everything. So before you put in, a month of work developing a course or a workshop, and you build out all the material and you set up the venue and you have all the stuff, and then you go, okay, we're launching, and everybody go buy your ticket, and you hear crickets.
Crickets, yeah.
And it's like, oh no. And you hear that happen with people where they're like, I invested thousands and thousands and hundreds of hours and nobody bought it. And so I think the best advice I've received, which I've applied to my own business, is to test demand and get feedback and continue to test that with, using Facebook, using Google and landing pages and ads, and say, okay, that language didn't resonate, or that offer didn't resonate, or that price is wrong, and continue to kind of iterate and test that until now you have people signing up. And now that you have people signed up saying, yes, I want to be on the wait list for this thing and I want this product or this service, then you can build it and kind of finish it up and then come back to those people and say, okay, now it's ready, let's get going. But yeah, building it before they want it is a bit of a mistake.
And if we just sort of go back into your past a little, Larry, at Apple, when Jobs came back and you worked with him for that, for his last stint, how did he handle that? Because often, I hear a lot of press about, he was ahead of the curve, and he often, put something out and then consumers adopted it. What's your take on how Steve and Apple used to go about that?
I think it was certainly much more challenging in those days to do traditional software and hardware. The lead time is incredible, right? So later I found out how lucky we were at places like eBay and Yahoo that we could do live testing and see metrics and literally see millions of people clicking or not clicking. So you would be able to tune things very quickly. And at Apple, we had to build software for 6 months and then kind of launch it and hope that people would buy it. And it was always kind of chasing old data, right? But I think if you look at what Apple did, is very rarely, I can't even think of a single time actually, did they successfully come out with the very first version of any product. Mm-hmm. So they weren't the first music player. The iPod wasn't the very, very first portable music player, and they weren't the first smartphone. There were, BlackBerry and so forth. So I think they actually used competitors' failures in the market, or looking at maybe not a complete failure, but not as stellar, kind of runaway success with the consumers as it could have been. And I think they looked at that and deconstructed it and said, well, why isn't this product more popular? Why aren't more people buying this? What's it missing? How would we take this and make it 10 times better? So I think that's a lot of what Apple did. And that's how they did their, quote, early testing, was with other people's products that weren't necessarily huge successes. People often talk about these brilliant ideas kind of coming out of nowhere and creating demand. And, I think Apple's very good at creating demand for their products, but they weren't the very first product of that type that ever came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, that's a really rich insight. And I still remember I think it was the mouse. Was it who had the mouse?
I think it was Xerox, wasn't it?
Yeah, Xerox. Yeah, in the film, and he took it from there. But
the first GUI. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right, great. So now we'll sort of shift into the live part, I suppose. So take me through your sort of typical week, if there is such a thing as a typical week. Tell me a little bit about what your week looks like now.
Yeah. So I like to start my days with my kind of exercise and fitness stuff. And that's, typically I schedule that about 4 to 5 days a week, and get that done first thing in the morning, get it out of the way, because life interrupts. And that's kind of the nature of life, is something urgent always comes up that will interrupt your routine if you let it. So that's how I like to start my days. And then I'll check in basically in all my different kind of communication channels, and boy, we have so many now, but just to see if there's anything urgent that I have to deal with. But what I do like to do is basically schedule 1 to maybe 3 at the most critical core to-do task for each day of the week. And so I will kind of map those out over the week. And I've moved away from having kind of a huge checklist of all my to-dos that I had to go through because it was overwhelming. And it, I ended up being distracted by items on the list that maybe weren't the highest priority, but they're, really salient. So I've changed that. And basically on each day of the week, I've said, here's the 1 to 3 things that I want to get done on that day. And I focus completely on that. And to the exclusion of other things that would love to have my time, it's like, okay, I'm not going to look at my Facebook ads today. I'm going to get this task done that I said I was going to get done, and I'll look at Facebook ads tomorrow. That's what I'll do. So that's basically how I kind of map out my week. And it's a mix of some content creation. So I like to write articles. I like to record video, and then reusing that content. So a lot of kind of redistribution through my different channels throughout the rest of the week. And then, of course, I have time scheduled that I spend with the clients that I'm mentoring. So we set up our kind of regular schedule of that. And I do spend quite a bit of time, I would say, with my Facebook group, which is a bit at the top of my funnel. I have a free Facebook group that I go into, and it's, challenges and questions and kind of putting thoughts out and polls into the group that inform me about, what I'm doing with my practice, but answering their questions as well. But it's a bit of mix of content creation, distribution, social interaction, and then working with my clients.
Great. And we'll put a link in the show notes, but what's the free Facebook group called?
It's called Brilliant Forge, so they can find it. It's the same as my company name, so it's pretty easy to find. It's a closed group, so people have to apply. And that's, again, to have a little bit of kind of that privacy for people to feel a little more open about their careers. And so it's a little bit better than open Facebook. So it's not everybody under the sun that's in there. But obviously it's not quite as private as my mastermind group.
Great. And look, I know you've had corporate, your own business, sort of back into corporate and then back into your own business. So you've had, both sides, I suppose, of the ledger. Just reflecting back, what's something that you've achieved in your own business that you don't think you would have achieved if you had stayed in corporate?
Yeah. Wow. I would say just the diversity of people that I've had a chance to work with and the things that I've learned. What unfortunately tends to happen in the corporate environment is you hyper specialize. So you not only hyper specialize in role, like, okay, I'm the VP and this is what I do, and I'm not allowed to do marketing. I'm not allowed to do advertising. I don't learn anything about those because I'm just the VP of product, right? And you also kind of specialize in your product. And so when you're working on search, you're working on search. You're not working on communications, and you're not working on social media or things like that. So I think leaving the corporate environment and becoming an advisor to startups really was like going back to college for me. I got to learn about a whole wealth of different types of industries and different types of business models and products, and work with people from all over the world, which has been amazing. I did some of that at eBay and Yahoo, but every day I talk with folks like yourself, people in Australia, people in the UK, people in Spain. It's just been a really wonderful experience to interact with people all over the world with very different perspectives and very different experiences. I'm learning so much every day.
Look, I think that's such a rich insight, and I totally agree. And if I look, often you got good at doing, unfortunately, the politics. I don't know what those American companies you work for, but certainly, me working at Coca-Cola, it was hugely political, and you really got good at just managing the politics, which, at the end of the day, you only had so many hours at work that just took from all that learning. So there was a degree of learning.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I've just learned so much more because I don't spend 6, sometimes 10 hours a day in meetings. And I also don't have to, sort of work up and work down and do all the politics that, and I find that's why I love this community, the BLG community, is people just, generally everyone wants to help you. You're not fighting for that one next job, And I remember back in corporate, I often got side flanked by the fact that, hang on, I've realized now that we're all fighting for that one next job. I didn't realize I was, because I was sharing as openly as I could, but I realized the other guys were playing with a different set of rules.
Right.
So I think that's a great point by you. So as far as give, so the next part is around giving. What's a cause or a community that you're really passionate about, and why?
It's kind of happened over the last few years that I've become very passionate about the community of older individuals who are suffering a little bit from age discrimination. I'll be honest. Maybe we see it more intensely in Silicon Valley, but I know it happens in various industries around the world. So I've seen kind of an unfortunate situation where very smart and talented and experienced people are passed over promotions or jobs or what have you, and they're really trying to figure out, well, what's my next career if I no longer can move up in this career? And so I've become very passionate about people who are, I would say, in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s saying, I'm not, I'm ready to retire. I want to keep working and I want to keep contributing. I want to, be able to kind of have a legacy on this earth, but what am I going to do? So that's become a bit of a passion for me, is to help that community, to help them figure out what's next for them.
Great. Yeah, look, I certainly resonate with that. And, as I said, 5 or 6 years ago, when a lot of my corporate friends saw me leave, thought I was absolutely crazy. Whereas a lot of them now are really interested in, well, what do? You seem to work from home. You seem to always be there for your family. You seem to be taking your kids overseas a lot.
Yes,
yeah.
that's true.
Tell me more about it. So I think part of this community's ethos is in line with what you're saying, is how do we help those people that have worked really hard, done a great job in corporate, but now they want to, what I call is, make their mark. So how do we help them do that? And I think Brilliant Forge is a great way of doing that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
So the last bit is just around some quick questions. It doesn't have to be a quick answer, but a quick question around some practical and actionable advice you can give the BLG community. So the first one is, what's one productivity tip, personal productivity tip you'd love to give listeners?
I would say, if you aren't already, to use Evernote, which I think is a fantastic tool. And I know there are others, but I've kind of become addicted to Evernote because it works on every platform and it's well designed. It's so easy to pull up on your phone, but there are many times you have great ideas, and if you wait, you'll forget. Even though you think you'll remember, you will forget. So when you wake up first thing in the morning, or you just get out of the car and you're like, oh, I just had this idea, I pull out my phone, open up Evernote, and I jot down a note. So that I can keep track of everything, whether it might be a new business idea or something I want to do with a marketing campaign, whatever it is. So I think Evernote is a fantastic tool just because it's so accessible.
Great. And I don't know if you've got your phone with you now, but what are some of the other apps that you have on your home screen that you would recommend other people have a look at?
Yeah, Evernote is right there on my home screen. I do use Trello as well, and that's good for kind of moving things through stages of a process. It's a board model, so you can have things from idea to working to completed to whatever. So it's kind of a nice little tool. My calendar, I've really lately settled on something called Fantastical. I've tried so many calendars over the years, and this one seems to be the most stable, well-designed, and it kind of blends in things that I need to do as well as calendar items, and it works with multiple calendars, which I think is really nice. I have Slack on my phone, obviously. I think that's important. LinkedIn, Pages, so I manage all my Facebook business pages. So there's a Pages app that I can use for that. And then I have, Instagram, which I think is a underutilized channel for a lot of business folks, because I think it's just, photography and fun, but it can actually be used to inspire others, depending on what your business is. Twitter, Facebook. That's kind of the biggies. That's the ones I spend the most time in.
Okay, brilliant. And podcasts. So I'm a self-professed podcast junkie. Just, a couple of key podcasts that you listen to and other BLG listeners could potentially test.
Yeah, one that I like it's called Social Media Marketing. So it's just a lot of insights into, Twitter and Facebook and other, social media channels, doing live video and, Periscope and so forth, and really looking at what's working, what's not, and what's changing, because things are constantly changing. So that's a good one. I also like Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income. I like the way Pat thinks. So he also has a lot of kind of good advice around tech and so forth, but he was another big proponent of kind of that lean startup approach. I think he has a book called Will It Fly? And the whole idea was testing out your business idea in a very affordable, lightweight fashion to make sure that it's going to fly before you invest a lot of time and energy into it. And that's probably the two that I listen to the most. I'll be honest. The other stuff is, for fun. I like comedy, so I have comedy podcasts. But
cool, excellent. And what's one piece of advice you wish you had received when you first left corporate that you've learned along your journey?
I think the biggest piece of advice I wish I had received was not to immediately seek funding for my startup. There's a bit of an addiction in Silicon Valley, and it's kind of a badge of honor to receive seed funding in your Series A and so forth. And people treat that like a big success event. But the problem is you do that too early and you haven't achieved product market fit. And now you're burning cash that you really wish you'd had later when you're still trying to get traction and grow. So what I wish I had received is feedback to bootstrap the whole thing, get the product market fit and show that it's working and that things are really just need scale at this point, and then go get your round of funding to help scale things. Don't take the money too early.
Yeah, look, I think that's great advice. And the founder of Eventbrite presented here in Australia, I would have been about 4 years ago, and he was passionate about that. Only seek money when you really don't need it.
Yeah.
His summary way of saying it. So I think that's really powerful. And how can people find out more about you?
The easiest would be go to brilliantforge.com. That's BRILLIANTFORGE.com. That's a pretty easy way to find me. And I'm on Twitter as well under Cornett, Cornett.
Great. And all of the brilliant links that Larry's spoken about will be in the show notes, so you can get those. But Larry, I'd just love to thank you for sharing your journey. It's been such a rich journey. You've worked for some of the biggest brands and biggest growing companies in the world, and you've also now formed a fantastic community with Brilliant Forge. And we love having you in the BLG community. So love to really thank you for sharing your thoughts here today and wish you every success in the future.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.